On this episode, we cover part 2 of the Rogan response to the Epstein files. No Rogan Experience starts now. Welcome back to the show. This is a show where two podcasters with still 171 hours in Rogan Experience get to know Joe Rogan. It's a show for those who are curious about Joe Rogan, his guests, and their claims, as well as for anyone who wants to understand Joe's ever-growing media influence. I'm Cecil Cicirello. That's Michael Marshall. Today, we're going to be covering part 2 of Joe Rogan and his guest's reaction to the Epstein files. We started this last week. We're continuing our trek through Joe's recent and back catalog coverage of discussions on Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes, as well as a lot of other conspiracies that work their way in, get jammed in there as we work our way through this. There's going to be some great ones today. You're going to really enjoy this show because they really go off on the crazy train with a couple of these guests. So we're going to finish our main event, and then we're going to do an undercard on the back catalog. But before we do that, we want to thank our Area 51 All Access Pass patrons. They are Lucy Cortez, Stone Banana, Dr. Andrew Gibson, the online physics tutor, Chonky Cat in Chicago has claws out, Morgan Gordon, Blue Ridge True Crime Podcast, Darlene, Left Hand Voodoo, Scott Laird, Definitely an AI Overlord, Carissa Gunderson, 11 Gruthius, Normal Names, Angie Matke, Fred R. Gruthius, Billionaire Oligarchs, Laura Williams, no, not that one, the other one, Ramtam Tickler, Cindy Lynch, yes, that's Cindy Lynch, Stargazer 97, Matthew Cutler, autistic Twitch streamer, I just found out Marsh did COVID and I'm chuffed, don't thank me, your show is just worth investment, and the unofficial No Rogan complaint department. They all subscribe to patreon.com/No Rogan. You can do that too. They all subscribed at the Area 51 All Access Pass patron level, but there are other levels available for all different types of patrons. And every single one of our patrons gets early access to episodes. They get an ad-free show, and they get a special patron-only bonus segment this week, which you heard last week, patrons, because it's going to be all cramped together in one bonus segment. But you did get a bonus segment that included this stuff that we talked about this week. And so there was one last week. There'll be another one next week. We can't make multiple bonus segments for the same content.
This is the same one again. It's fine.
It's the same one. It's the same one. Go listen to it twice. That's what you need to do. But we want to thank our patrons, of course, because they help support this show. And we hope that you, after hearing this coverage, maybe consider going to patreon.com/No Rogan so that you too can help support the show. So we're going to continue on with our coverage with our main event.
It's time!
All right, so huge thank you to this week's veteran voice of the podcast. That was Jay of the Dirge Carolers announcing our main event. Remember that you too can be on the show by just sending us a recording of you giving us your best rendition of It's Time. You can send that to NoRoganPod@gmail.com, as well as how you'd like to be credited on the show. So we're starting back up here, Marsh, and this is moving on to February 11th.
Okay, so that's the day after Cheryl Hines. This is like the third show that he's mentioned, that he's really talked about the Epstein files since the files came out.
Yeah, we started, we started on February. We started in January. He covered them a little bit at the beginning of February, and then more things came out. So the 10th, 11th, and the 10th, and now we're at the 11th, and now he's still talking about it. This was a person by the name of Roger Avery. Now, Avery is a producer, director, and Academy Award-winning screenwriter known for Pulp Fiction that he wrote with. He co-wrote it with Quentin Tarantino. He also wrote Killing Zoe and I think the Silent Hill movies. He also co-hosts a podcast with Tarantino called the Video Archives Podcast, and this person is really something else. So you're gonna hear the conspiracies get turned up to 11 with Roger Avery, and so we're gonna jump in. It's about an hour into their conversation. They bring up the Epstein files.
Yeah, there's all sorts.
Did you see the thing in the Epstein files?
Oh yeah, like those Epstein files. In fact, I can't believe that, like, everybody just kind of like, oh, well, okay, and they're moving on with their lives. Like, what the fuck? You know, you're all just pretending you're just drones going on in your normal lives.
People are waiting for a condensed version that lays out all the facts. It's the people that are like really interested in reading all the emails.
I think the Luciferians cast a spell on the world. And,
for real?
Oh, absolutely. It's just like how vampires can't go into a house unless they're invited. They tell you, what's going on ahead of time. It's predictive programming. And once you say it out loud and you put it out there and make fun of it and do a little skit like Stephen Colbert did a little skit on his show where, oh, here's a baby. I'm going to take this baby and I'm going to give it to Moloch. And he goes into like a cloudy red, furnace and hands the baby over. And he's, oh, the baby's going to be fine. And they make a joke about it and the audience laughs. Okay, we're all now conditioned to it. We've all seen it. And by laughing at it, we were complicit.
You think that's on purpose, that this is like some sort of a grand design to get us to be desensitized to the idea of demons eating babies?
Yeah, for sure.
Really?
For sure. And by the way, nobody's doing anything about it. We know what's happening.
But that has to take, there has to be a person or some group of people.
Yeah, like about 8,500 people. Yeah.
That are manipulating the Colbert Show?
That are manipulating everything. It's all an illusion. Like, reality as we know it is fake.
Okay, I mean, first of all, we know who's manipulating the Colbert Show. It's the guy at the top of his network who keeps cancelling him and not allowing him to interview Jim Tallarico and things. Yeah, so
and
we
you
know
can
all
call
about
that person Lucifer too.
You can if you want to. But look how this is the day after Cheryl Hines. We covered Cheryl Hines on last week's episode, part 1 episode. They were talking about at least things that were more grounded in the world. But we're so divorced now from what's actually in the Epstein files and what the crimes actually were, that we're talking about how Luciferians need to do predictive programming and tell you what's going on before it happens, and then eating babies, and how there's 8,500 people who really control the world, including controlling the Colbert Show. When we talk about all this, do you know what we're not talking about? The world's most prolific sex trafficker.
You bet.
And do you know what else we're not talking about? Any of his victims, any of the people who were harmed, the women and the girls who were abused and harmed here, they are just absent now, really, from this conversation, because we're talking about demonic eating of babies instead.
Yeah, this is a continuation from last week's episode. They weren't talking about the victims then. They still aren't talking about the victims. They're talking about, and they're not even talking about the salacious part of what happened to the victims. They are shifting on to salacious stuff that we have no evidence for, and that is literally pulled out of the minds of 4chaners when it came to Pizzagate. This is what this is all coming from. What is he talking about? If someone makes a joke about a baby in a furnace, then we're all fine if we hear that there's an actual baby in a furnace. What on earth are you talking? That is the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard anyone say out loud. And he doubles down on it during this clip. And he's also saying no one's doing anything. No one's doing anything about something that's not actually happening. What are you talking about? He's making it, and they actually we cut a piece of this out, right? So there's a piece of this out where he's talking about very specifically, he saw a video recently where someone was freaking out about the Epstein files and it was caught in a TikTok. They were at an airport and he's like, look, see, this guy's freaking out about it. And he's right. No, that guy's having a breakdown about something that you are fueling, not the actual release of factual things is fueling.
Yeah, it's very rare that you can point to footage of somebody yelling in an airport lounge as being, that's the guy who's got a handle on things. This person has things right, the one who's just shouting randomly at people in an airport. Even his point here about, Stephen Colbert can make jokes about a baby going in an oven and therefore we're all right about it. That's not true, even the sense of we're not all right about it, because you're not all right about it. You're the one bringing that joke up and you're not all right about it. So the programming failed, even if you believed in it, it doesn't work. The Luciferian programming didn't work on you.
He juked that spell. He just sidestepped it. Or he circle spun move and you just get right around that spell. That's what happens. Also, do you think at this point, I don't think it is true, but we're close to the bottom with Joe Rogan guests, right? With a reality isn't real guy. Do you think that this is close? I think this is close to the bottom of Joe Rogan's guests.
It certainly shows the harm of the span of Joe Rogan's guests, because with Anna Paulina Luna, she had a very kind of extreme version of how the world is constructed, and she will sit in a run of guests alongside Mike Benz, who's saying, well, here's what the CIA are really doing, and Evan Hafer will come to in a minute. They all sit next to each other, and the problem is, it's like the way that certain viruses mutate is that the worst thing is you find a virus that can be transmitted to pigs and multiple viruses, or to birds, bird flu. It contracts multiple viruses at once, and then the virus exchanges RNA with other viral cells that are in there, and two strains of viruses can effectively make each other stronger by exchanging information about how to bypass defenses. That's what's happening with Joe Rogan. He is the bird, the patient zero bird of bird flu that all these different viral ideas come to. And individually, these viral ideas do not overmesh. They can't exchange anything in the wild. But when they are in the highly fertile environment of Joe Rogan's podcast room, they can exchange ideas through Joe Rogan and leave Joe with a mind melded version of all these different ideas. That is the danger here. So yeah, doesn't believe reality is real. Joe Rogan's not going to believe that, but he is going to take some stuff from this guy and add it to what he's seen from other people.
Yeah. Do you think that those 8,500 viruses cast a spell on the rest of us? Do you think that's how it works?
I think so.
All right. I mentioned it a second ago because it really does reach into Pizzagate, but they're going to get even deeper into Pizzagate in this next clip.
The thing about the emails is, one of the things is it's just stuff written down. And so that's sort of hard to digest. Like, what is this? Like, what are they saying? Like, some of it is in code, like walking over beef jerky, like talking about jerky. Could you walk beef jerky over to this person? Like, what does that mean?
For all this pizza they're talking about, you never see any pizza.
Right. Yeah. They're ordering pizza.
I'm going to get some grape soda. It's like with my cheese pizza.
Yeah.
And like, there's all this coded language, and everyone's like, oh, that's you just have pareola. You're just seeing things where you want to see them.
No, this is clearly a code. Well, that was the thing about Pizzagate. It's
absolutely a code. And in fact, mundus vult decipi, ergo decipiatur. It's a long-known concept. And so in Latin, mundus vult decipi means the world wants to be deceived. Ergo decipiatur. Therefore, it is. We want to be deceived. We don't want to believe the horrors that are actually behind the veil.
Ugh.
Okay, so this is the big code of it all. This is the stuff that's going to be linking into Pizzagate. I've talked about this in kind of other places that people in the article that you mentioned that I wrote for the Skeptic magazine and for Skeptics with the K. I talked about how people were going through the Epstein files looking for code words that mean things. Essentially picking up on the kind of training, the breadcrumb spotting training that people did with the QAnon conspiracy theory. When they say cheese pizza, that's code for child pornography. So whatever they say in cheese pizza, they're not talking about cheese pizza. So and that's the kind of thing that people have done with the Epstein files here. Look for certain words that they think must be code. And one of those is jerky, for example. Put some links in the show notes to where jerky has been found in the files. I know they kind of mention it here. Joe's mentioned it a couple of times too. There's one of the files is an email which says, Francis has time to come tomorrow to show me how to make jerky class anyone. He'll also bring you a taste of his new jerky recipe from the restaurant and sends a warm hello. He is working at a restaurant called Cannibal and cooks, wait for it, beef jerky and steak. That is an email sent by Joe Rogan to people. That's an email sent by Jeffrey Epstein to people. That is one of the things that people are picking up on to say, well, it's evidence that whenever they say jerky, they're talking about eating flesh. And we know that because it's a restaurant called Cannibal and it cooks jerky. It's not really jerky, it's human meat. Or it could just be jerky. It could just be jerky. It could just be that Jeffrey Epstein had learned how to make jerky, had acquired a taste for it, and then wanted to continue making jerky, got excited about the little arts and crafts thing that the craft thing that he just learned here. There's another link we'll put in the show notes. It's Jeffrey Epstein asking someone to bring him more jerky on Friday and says, they say, aren't you flying on Friday? If not, I'll collect it for you. I'll take it on the plane. Please let me know. So someone's asking for some jerky that they want to get to Epstein. Someone responds to say, I'll have it with me. Can I give you it tomorrow? Someone says, it can't be tomorrow. It'll have to be tomorrow rather. It's the afternoon. I've got some here. They're talking about the beef jerky drying. This is just people talking about jerky. There's nothing in here that suggests this is anything other than somebody talking about a food that they like, because we get all of their content. We get all of their contact, their emails, their texts. Some of that is going to be about mundane stuff. We don't need to look into it deeper than that necessarily.
You have to really massage your metaphor to make it work too. Like you have to really work really hard on the other end to make it seem like those things are actually about something else. If you're just talking about jerky, it makes sense. If you have to like throw in that it means some other code word, then it stops making sense.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one that people pick up on. There's an email here where they're saying, just want to touch base about jerky. Jeffrey Epstein said he's going to start eating regular food again, so he might eat less jerky. That said, he's got 6 bags of it in the downstairs freezer for his next trip. I believe it. That should be enough to get him through. Any other questions, please let me know, says Francis. Francis being the guy who's making jerky for Jeffrey Epstein. This is him saying, if you want any more, let me know, although I'm hearing that he doesn't want to eat as much of it. People are saying this is suspicious because why would you need a freezer to keep jerky? And the whole point of jerky is that it's you can keep it out. It's kind of dried meat. Well, depending on the jerky, like if you're buying jerky off the shelf at a store, maybe. But we're talking about a guy who started a restaurant selling jerky, who's a top end chef to elite people. Maybe his jerky he thinks should be kept refrigerated. Like, who cares? It's fucking jerky. This is an evidence of cannibalism. You know, the next one about jerky, checking in to see if the jerky situation has been sorted. Last week we spoke, you planned to have FedEx to Paris. Just so we're on the same page. The jerky is shelf stable and can travel without refrigeration. So you don't need to refrigerate. They know you can't refrigerate it as well. It's just, you know, this is all just kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is just a guy who's rich enough to have his favorite food flown in from the person who prepares his food best, he thinks. This is just it. This is just how wealthy elites use their money in order to get themselves a life of luxury where nothing is off limits to them.
Yes.
And, you know, sometimes that involves the horrific crimes that Jeffrey Epstein and the people around him were guilty of, but also it can just be nothing's off limit in terms of getting the food that you want whenever you want it from whoever you want it at the time that you want it. You know, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
We'll talk about pizza as well. You say all these mentions of pizza. There's 819 mentions of pizza. I looked through it. They're him talking about going to get a pizza before a show or asking what varieties of pizza, someone asking on his behalf what varieties of pizza are available in a place. Roger even says all these mentions of pizza and you never see any pizza. Well, first of all, how many times have you ever texted anybody about getting a pizza? And how many of those messages involved you sending a follow-up picture of said pizza?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, not that many at all. And also, beyond that, there is literally a message where he shows a picture of the pizza. The guy who keeps talking about getting pizza and grape soda, there's literally a message in the files where he shows a picture of the slice that he does. So the thing that I said that never happens because it would be weird to do that. This guy just does that. Here's a picture of the grape soda and the pizza that I'm having here.
Outstanding.
He says cheese pizza. You know, cheese pizza being the QAnon, Pizzagate code for child pornography. That phrase, cheese pizza, that they're mentioning here appears 7 times in all of the Epstein Library. In the 3.5 million files in the library, it appears 7 times, 4 of which are articles about how The Rock ate cheese pizza and donuts to make weight for a role where he was playing an NFL player. It's a newspaper story that he just texts him. Like, these aren't if that's code, they manage to embed that code into an article about The Rock's upcoming film. That is a level of of entry into the press, manipulation of the press, hitherto unexpected in the Epstein files.
8,500 people working on it, though, Marsh, that's trivial.
That is true. That is very true. Grape soda. They're talking about grape soda. He's alleging it's code for rape.
Right.
Again, most of the mentions there's 9 times that grape soda is mentioned. Most of them are in text exchanges where a guy, Harry Fish, is literally like sends a picture of some Pop-Tarts. One of them is he sends a picture of Pop-Tarts to Jeffrey Epstein, says, they've got these new Pop-Tarts at Greensburg's Bakery. How about we go there? And before that, maybe we get a slice of pizza and a grape soda, and then we get a Pop-Tart. And in that exchange, or in an exchange like it, he sends a picture of the grape soda and the pizza. So he's just gone to get a slice, a drink, and then suggesting getting a cake afterwards. Is that proof that he was like saying, let's go and get some child porn and then rape somebody and then go and get the Pop-Tart that he sent a picture of? Or is he just saying we'll get a bite to eat and then a drink and then this cake for dessert? Like, the guy messages 4 times over a period of about 4 or 5 months, each with often with pictures of different cakes that he's seen, and suggested we'll go and get a pizza, a grape soda, and then go and get one of these cakes from this bakery. It just That's what it is. And that's in there if you look for it. And the thing about all this is, I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time looking through the Epstein files for this kind of stuff. All of this stuff, this code, this looking for hidden meanings, and when they say pizza, do they mean, pornography? Do they mean raping a child? Things like that. All of this is just distraction from the very real and very clear sex trafficking and abuse of women and girls that are in the files.
Yeah.
They're there in the files.
Right.
They're not paying attention to those. Roger and Joe aren't talking about those because to these men and to the people in Joe's orbit, those crimes aren't enough to make the news. Those are too boring and mundane. Yeah, we knew that he was a pedophile. So when there's pictures of him meeting with Steve Bannon and we're having to redact out the faces of the girls in the photos that are on Epstein's desk in that meeting because those girls were underage, that's boring. But when it's all about eating the flesh and making jerky and that's exciting. And that's where these guys are engaging with this. They don't, in my opinion, they don't pay anywhere enough care to the actual victims here.
And they make it seem like they were committing crimes in front of everybody's face and no one knew it. We did know it. There was enough evidence to convict both him and Maxwell that they were actually committing crimes. Maxwell got convicted of sex trafficking of a minor, transporting a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 3 related counts of conspiracy. Epstein, in his first conviction, got, like we suggested, he was charged with that soliciting prostitution from an underage person, which is just a nice way of saying child rape. But then he was also convicted of he was charged. He didn't actually get convicted on the second time because he had died by suicide beforehand, but it was 1 count of sex trafficking of minors. And that carried a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison, and 1 count of conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking of minors, which carried 5 years in prison. So they had enough evidence to charge him with it and keep him in custody. And they had enough evidence to charge Maxwell with this stuff. It's not like they were hiding this stuff in general amongst themselves. It's not like they were hiding this. Why would they need this other elaborate code in order to hide this stuff if we already had this sort of evidence, that we can charge them with actual crimes for? It's because you're making all this stuff up to make it more salacious to forget about the real victims. So now this is a through line that is going to stay with the rest of the show, talking about a sulfuric acid purchase.
Well, I think with the Epstein files, people are, because of these emails that have been released, people are just now starting to be aware of the bizarreness of the code and some of the things, like the facts. Like, let's just talk about the sulfuric acid. So this was like right after he was indicted in 2018.
Yeah, I got to get rid of some bodies.
Yeah.
I got
How much did
dissolve up some bodies.
What did it say he ordered? Like, let's
like 8,000 gallons, or
dozen, 55
maybe we can get our
containers.
sponsor Perplexity to process this and give us a synopsis of what exactly happened, some sort of a breakdown. Because one of the things they're saying is like he was indicted. And then right after he's indicted, he orders how many gallons?
55-gallon containers full of stuff.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. What?
they're eating babies, man. Like that's
Do you think so that you think is real? So
well, yeah. Not only that, I think that there's sacrifices going on every day in Los Angeles. I mean, allegedly, like high level. Musicians, let's say, high-level female musician, is like, killing chickens every day, doing sacrifices. Like,
high level.
Well, I don't want to say, I don't want to say names because I don't want to get sued. And I don't want to be dead either.
What does it rhyme like?
Here's the purchase order. I started looking at the comments for some stuff. Not that this is the best answer, but a quick answer someone gives is that this could be for like a reverse osmosis water treatment system.
It's true. He is on an island.
He's on an island.
I mean, there's enough pushback because mundus vult decipi, ergo decipiatur. But like the timing of all of that, where are the purchase orders for all of that sulfuric acid before then? Oh, no, I just want to put sulfuric acid into my swimming pool. Muriatic acid.
Well, that's the question. Was there orders for sulfuric acid before this? If they do have a water treatment plant, how does sulfuric acid play into water treatment?
It's commonly used. This explains it. I don't know.
Okay. It says RO plant, reverse osmosis seawater desalination facility. Sulfuric acid is commonly used in the maintenance of such facilities. Not everything you don't understand adds up to the worst possible thing it could be. Deception.
Look, maybe they're all eating pizza and grape soda.
Who is that guy that's
How
saying
many
this?
billionaires do you know that sit down and eat lots of pizza and grape soda?
I love this perplexity. It's like shaming him into not into believing this.
They're talking about the sulfuric acid here, okay? There are 26 mentions of sulfuric acid amongst the 3.5 million files in the documents here. Some of those are duplicate mentions, where you'll get an email chain as one artifact, and then you'll get a reply to that email, including the initial email, as a second document, or the same document will be listed twice in different kind of copies of it. So there's 26, but there's a lot of kind of overlap here between those 26, a lot of duplication. One of those documents is an email chain, which is subject titled LSJ SWRO plant. Now that's Little St. John, which is the island. Epstein Island was called Little St. John. And SWRO is seawater reverse osmosis plant. It's like a desalination plant for supplying water to the island. In this email, it includes, it's like an email exchange with an analysis from an SWRO plant specialist, where they're analyzing the island's water supply, looking particularly at the pH levels of the water supply. And saying actually there was problems with the water supply, that it's at the wrong kind of pH level. And one of Epstein's assistants forwards this email from the SWRO specialist to Epstein with the note: inspected the RO plant and tested the water discharging out of each of the membranes. He doesn't feel it's a membrane issue. The seawater in our area seems to result in high pH when processed through an RO system. This has evidently been an issue from day one. There needs to be a sulfuric acid injection pump added in order to offset this. That high pH is most likely causing some of our rust issues and needs to be resolved. That's what the sulfuric acid was for. That's why there was so much of it. So when they say, well, they can say that he bought it this time, but where's the purchase orders all the other times of the sulfuric acid? They didn't purchase any before. They experienced rust. When you read it, they experienced rust issues on their water treatment. They were looking into why. They checked one thing, the membranes, it wasn't that. And when the guy checked other parts of it, he said, oh, you got a pH problem because of the local water. In order to solve that pH problem, you're going to need a sulfuric acid injection added to this in order to balance the water back out for the desalination plant. Here's a quote. I'll get you a quote for the injection pump, and then later they ordered sulfuric acid for it. That is the story with the acid here. It took me genuinely longer to explain that than it took me to find that. You know, it took me about 30 seconds to look it up in the Epstein files. I put the word sulfuric acid in the Epstein files. You find this email. It now makes sense. Instead of doing that, these incredibly rich men assumed it was proof that Jeffrey Epstein was habitually eating babies and dissolving bodies, or was dissolving the bodies after he was indicted in order to cover up the crime. Why was he only doing it then after he was indicted?
Yeah.
You know, right after he was indicted? Because his team found this issue then. He didn't order the acid. He didn't sign off the purchase orders. He didn't go on Amazon and look for sulfuric acid. He had guys who did that. He had people who did that. That's what this is.
Like, can I ask why sulfuric acid isn't a code? Right? I mean, like, we're presuming that cheese pizza is a code. We're presuming that pizza and grape soda is a code. Why isn't sulfuric acid a code? You're talking about all these other things. It's only a code when you can put the numbers together. When there's actually a push pin there, then it's not a code. But if it's just a word that I need a push pin for, I now create it as a code. I get to decide what's a code and what's not a code.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he code this? If this is implication of his crimes, why not code this too? Why not be like, well, I need to get some vinaigrette out over at the island. Make sure my favorite chef brings down his favorite vinaigrette so I can put these young scallops in it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like why isn't he saying that instead? Instead, it's like, oh, well, here he's very explicit in what he's going to do because we can easily add these things up in our head. This is just you going through and you're making your own hits and misses. That's not even counting the hits and forgetting the misses. You're just making up your own hits and misses when you come through this. Also, you live on an island. What do you need a fucking acid vat for? Just chop up a body and roll into the ocean and chum the water for a few minutes. You'll never never find a body out there. What does he need acid on an island for? He could just get rid of a body. Also, just a regular, you could just throw it in a hole somewhere with some lye on it. That'll also get rid of it. That's how we've been getting rid of bodies for centuries. We know how to do this. You don't need acid. That's like you're making up a movie plot when you talk about this stuff. And also, what do you need acid for if you're eating babies? Can't you just use the acid in your stomach to get rid of the pieces of the babies? What do I need extra acid for? What are you talking about? The only reason you're believing this is because they believe stuff they saw on 4chan. The thing is that they picked common words out of the Podesta emails. They picked common words out of there, and they just used it. Basically, this is a flow over from the Podesta emails, right? So they did this with the Podesta emails because they had a huge tranche of information, and they very specifically went through and were like, "What?" Some guy on 4chan was like, "Hey, man, what can I say is something?" And then they made it all up. Like they made it up, and then you bought it, and now you're continually talking about this as if this was a real thing that actually happened. Okay, so this is more about that 8,000 plus person cabal.
There is so much out there that it falls to faith. And it also, what does it really matter? That's kind of what I'm getting at ultimately, is what does all of that really matter? What does it matter to anybody that there's a cabal of 8,000 plus people who are secretly controlling the world and doing occultism and drinking baby blood? What does it really matter as long as you can just have your daily pint?
This is a very different subject now. We've shifted. You've moved away from the concept of the earth being flat, and it's a giant lie that's promoted by a huge group of people that aren't even connected in any way, shape, or form, to evil people that are involved in cult-like rituals, which has, by the way, always existed. And this is why it's very difficult for people to imagine today that some of the things that you're hearing from the Epstein files, like the potential that they were eating children or killing children, or that they use that sulfuric acid to boil bodies. We don't want to believe in evil that is that deep. But in my opinion, if you can find out that evil is real, right? Evil most certainly is real. There's evil acts that we have documented all throughout the world. There's evil that the cartel does. I just watched a video where the cartel chopped this guy's head off and put it on a drone and flew it over to where the other cartel was.
They probably thought that was funny. They probably thought it was funny.
Having a good time. That's clearly evil. Yeah. There's plenty of evil.
Do you believe in demons?
I believe in the concept of demons.
I mean, demons don't materialize before us necessarily. They rest upon the shoulders of men and whisper into their ears.
I believe,
and then people do evil things.
This is what I believe. I believe that if I was a demon, or if demons were real, they would get people to do things which are verifiably true, that they have done.
Marsh, I'm going to let you go here in a second because I know you have a lot to say about this, but I just want to jump in here. How do we know it's only 8,000 people, 8,000 plus people? How do we know that number? Is there like a census of those people? Do they opt into a certain email? How do we know that that's 8,000 plus? And how do we know it's 8,000 plus and not actually 9,000? That sounds like it'd be crazy. If it's 9,000, maybe that's a little too much. It's got to be a certain predictable sort of number. 8,500 is the number that he's been using. And this also seems like it's a really exclusive club. I wonder if the way they keep it at 8,500 is if as you retire, they let a new person in. It's like a really exclusive country club, but with a lot of Latin. Like you have to say a lot of Latin to be in there.
Yeah, it could be like a Dead Men's Shoes kind of thing.
Yeah,
but the thing is, if that's the admission criteria, it really does encourage killing someone who's in the club in order to take their place. That is the problem that you've got with that cabal.
And then referring to them as cheese pizza later on or something. Yeah,
I mean, the terrifying thing is he probably has a reason why it's 8,500, and it's probably not something we're going to particularly like.
I tried to do a search because I was like, I'll bet you he's talking about the number of directors in SAG or something. And I couldn't figure out how that 8,500 worked. I'm going to ask ask our audience. Maybe you know what that 8,500 number means. My suspicion is it has to do with the film industry, but I don't know specifically if that's the case.
I think that's an incredibly innocent suspicion. I think it's way more likely to be some deep and horrible conspiracy theory, possibly with anti-Semitic tinges. That's where I'm guessing.
If anything, Marsh, I am innocent.
Okay, so the thing is, Joe is saying about evil here. He's saying, like, we don't want to believe how evil all this stuff was. We don't believe in evil things as deep as boiling the bones or the bodies of children in sulfuric acid after they've eaten their flesh. We don't want to believe in that. We don't want to believe in things that aren't true, Joe. That's the thing. When you make the story of Epstein all about eating babies because they said pizza and jerky and dissolving bodies because they bought chemical supplies for their water treatment plant. Yeah. What you're doing is taking it out of the realms of what was actually done, what was actually true.
Yeah, man.
And there were actual victims. We know that. According to the Justice Department, it may have been as many as 1,000 victims. 1,000. Not victims of dissolved bodies or cannibalistic rituals, but victims of sexual abuse and sex trafficking, including children. Now, when you bake your way into lurid details about things that aren't true, like cannibalism, it's because you didn't care enough to even check what the email about sulfuric acid actually said when you wrap this into your worldview. When you do that, what you're telling us pretty clearly is you don't give a fuck about the actual verifiable victims because you prefer the scare story. And that is what is happening with Joe throughout all of his response to Epstein. Whether it's because the story was the influence peddling, or the story was the blackmail, or the story was ingratiating himself in with all these other men, these rich, powerful elites. And that's why the story was that Jeffrey Epstein got corrupted by the assignment that he was given to try and get blackmail. And that's why he ended up abusing these girls himself. Like, those are the stories Joe is thinking. But the story was Jeffrey Epstein was a prolific sex offender who abused women and girls and sex trafficked them to people in his orbit even. And they are the victims, and they disappear constantly whenever Joe Rogan talks about that, which is, again, ironic given how often Joe Rogan comes back to, we need to protect women and girls.
Yeah. Okay, so here's an interesting bit of conspiracy that was going around about the same time. Jeffrey Epstein is still alive, and he's playing video games.
Did you notice that Jeffrey Epstein's Fortnite account suddenly became active in Tel Aviv, and that somebody is playing under his, right after his supposed death.
Right.
Suddenly he's playing Fortnite again.
Yeah, he doesn't even have the decency to make a new account.
Yeah, well, he wants to keep all of his,
stats.
His stats. He wants to keep all that stuff.
God.
And he's safe in in another country.
So do you think they just that's another thing. There was another Reddit thread about some guy who said that he was a guard.
It was a 4chan thread.
It was a 4chan?
Yeah.
So it was a 4chan thread where this guy said that he was a guard at the facility, and he posted this before Epstein was killed.
He was a guard. They uncovered, using whatever way they do it, but using phone records or whatever from 4chan, they discovered he was a guard and that he was like a legit guy. He got caught basically talking about it, that they snuck, they used a decoy body. Yes. There was an unscheduled ambulance arrival that night. They never logged in, and you're always supposed to log in. There's footage of orange, people in orange moving through the facility on the, just glimpses of it.
So you think he's alive somewhere?
It's
not impossible.
It's not impossible. It's probable.
Also,
it's a probability. It's more than a possibility.
So now they're floating the idea that Jeffrey Epstein isn't even dead. So it was previously, well, Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. It wasn't suicide because he was killed in order to silence him, to cover up all that he knew. The Democrats had to kill him so that Bill Clinton's misdeeds couldn't come. So they had him killed. But also, maybe he isn't dead. Okay, well, that for one thing, that stops the whole needing to silence him for what he knew kind of thing. Ultimately through all of this, they don't care what's true as long as the main narrative isn't. Yeah. And this is something that I see an awful lot when it comes to conspiracy theories. It's something I talked about when I spent a lot of time in the Flat Earth movement, like hanging around with flat earthers and going to events and stuff. They didn't have a coherent version of what the Earth looked like. They just knew what it wasn't.
Yes.
And that is what these guys are doing. This is classic conspiracy theorizing here. We don't know as long as the main story isn't true. Neither of these men actually care about what is true. They just care about the story, about being able to, hunker down on their podcast and say, hey, did you hear this one though? Have you seen this story? Isn't this interesting? Oh, well, maybe it's a possibility. It's a probability. It's more than a possibility. And their source for one of the things here is fucking 4chan. 4chan, where Pizzagate started, where QAnon started, where people routinely say, oh, by the way, me, anonymous poster, I'm a high-level intelligence operative and I have this particular information. Other people go, oh, really? That's interesting that you are that. I'm going to believe you and join in the role play. And then it spills into pages or the places where people like Joe and Roger see it and take it as if it was true.
Yeah. And just to jump in here about this Fortnite thing, I'll link an article in Mashable. It's debunked by the company that makes the game. They say it was a player prank. And these people just look so gullible for actually believing this. Also, by the way, if he was like other billionaires, he would have just hired a serf to grind for him on Fortnite like Elon Musk. He wouldn't do it himself. They would only go on once in a while when he wanted to stream it and then not know how to play the game like Elon Musk.
Yeah, the right way of doing things.
That's the right way a billionaire plays a video game.
They're so gullible. I mean, the fact that they set it to Tel Aviv as well, like the prank set it to Tel Aviv, it's so obviously leaving these little signs for someone as gullible as these two guys to pick up. And they do. And, I don't think Joe Rogan believes it, but he's willing to entertain it because it's entertaining to him. It's just entertaining.
Yeah.
But that whole conversation with Roger Avery, we've seen it go to some extreme places. The wild stuff about demons and sulfuric acid and cheese pizza and stuff. And we can say Joe Rogan doesn't believe this. He's willing to entertain it. But the problem is because Joe is this perfect vector for taking pieces of one virus and splicing it into another virus inside him, exchanging RNA, and then producing this hybridized virus that can pass through other people's defense systems out in the world, like the originator of the next H1N1. Because he is that. Look at what influence this conversation has on Joe Rogan going forward when he has future guests on, where he doesn't say some of the wilder parts of this, but does still retain some of the crazy things and integrate him into the worldview that he's put together from these other conversations.
It's an interesting metaphor, but I like it. Okay, so the next day, Joe talked about the Epstein files again. This is from February 12th. This is his episode 2453 with Evan Hafer. Now, we've covered Evan Hafer. I think it was the first or second show. I forget exactly which one it was, but it was a long time ago. It was the first thing we ever did. One of the first things we ever did. Evan Hafer is a special forces guy. He has a company called the Black Rifle Coffee Company. He hosts a show called the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast. So he's in Joe's orbit with all this special forces stuff. And so here's the first clip in their discussion. This comes 2 hours and 21 minutes into their show.
Bro, but these files, just what's come out so far, and the fact that they redacted men, these like powerful billionaire guys, their names were redacted. Like there's one of them where he's talking about pandemic planning.
What?
Where Jeffrey Epstein is talking about pandemic planning to someone named Bill, whose name is redacted. It's like, why are you redacting the guy's name that you're talking about planning for a pandemic, like what to do in response to a pandemic? Well, why is his name retracted? Or redacted, rather?
When are they supposed to testify? When are the Clintons supposed to testify? Would you say they're gonna 2 weeks? Did you say the aliens are coming in the next 2 weeks?
I think
they're gonna land.
I think that's
something's gonna happen
just before that testifying.
Yeah, it'll be we bomb Iran, aliens show up, maybe at the same time. Yeah.
So I agree that he's right, okay, that it is terrible that there were powerful men who were in the files who were redacted, but they weren't redacted because of the relationship with pandemic planning here. It isn't a crime to plan for a pandemic response. It's not even a crime to do that with Jeffrey Epstein. It's extremely poor judgment to do it, but it's not a crime. But there are men in the files here whose role in what Epstein was doing has been obscured through redaction. That is true. And it may well be that one of those men is the president. And I think that is something that is an elephant in the room throughout this entire week because it doesn't get mentioned. Even with this, here where these guys take it, it's about Bill Gates pandemic planning. Maybe redacting Bill Gates in that makes sense because it's not a crime, to be planning the pandemic response and stuff. But these guys take it to, well, the US is going to bomb Iran and it's going to be invaded by aliens in order to stop Bill Clinton from having to testify. But Joe, Evan, who's been bombing Iran so far? Who's been bombing Venezuela? Who's been threatening Greenland? It's not Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
It's the guy in power. And the guy that through all of these Epstein conversations all week almost entirely hasn't come up. They haven't mentioned Trump. In the whole script for this week's episode and part one's episode, the whole thing, all the transcripts of every clip we've played across both shows and the Gloves Off, even the ones we cut for time, in fact, Trump's name comes up 11 times in all of this conversation that we're using. Half of those 11 times are Joe or a guest pointing out that people in the Epstein files have made false claims about Trump, or that Democrats reacted to Trump winning so badly that that reaction itself must have been evidence of the cabal. So when Trump has come up in the 11 times, they're in defense of Trump. They haven't really, almost at all, talked about the fact that Trump was incredibly close to Epstein and comes up thousands and thousands of times in the Epstein library.
What's interesting, I'm noticing a pattern as we work our way through these clips, Marsh. There's a pattern, and the pattern seems to be at about 2 hours in, Joe is like, what else can I talk about? And then he brings up the files.
How about them Epstein files, huh? Yeah. Because there's only so much you can talk about being a special force guy who does coffee
and
sometimes.
How much you like coffee, I guess. Yeah. All right. So there's no cut here. This is literally no cut. So they end the last clip, and then they bring the acid back up. Not acid in their stomach, the sulfuric acid we talked about before.
Outside of Aliens, because everybody knows that. What are your other ones that you like?
Well, Aliens is the most fun one.
Yeah.
This is the one that I hate the most.
Yeah.
Because this one scares the shit out of me. Because the fear of, we talked about this yesterday with Roger Avery, the fear of these literally demonic human beings that are running the world and don't give a fuck about human lives and enjoy watching people being tortured, enjoy watching people killed, participating in ritual sacrifice of people, and they do it in order to show that you're a part of a team. And we know that has always historically been a real thing, and it's been something that you look at in history. You go, God, it's so sick, it's so twisted, it's so disgusting, and everybody wants to think, thank God that's not happening now. But then when you realize that might have been happening now. Here's one of the craziest ones. The day he was indicted in 2018, the very next day he ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid.
What?
Yes. He ordered 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island. And so there's a lot of people online saying, oh, that was probably for his desalination plant. It's probably a regular thing they need to order. So then someone else did a deep dive and said, no, this is the first time this was ever ordered.
I checked that again. I saw there was 2 other ones.
Oh, there was 2 other orders?
2017 and 2015.
Oh, so that guy was
been
wrong.
The first one from that company, potentially.
Ah, that makes sense. So maybe it was for this desalination equipment, but also that's a lot of sulfuric acid. If I needed 5 gallons for my desalination equipment, but
right,
239 gallons or whatever it is to burn kids, to fucking get rid of bodies.
Joe, you don't have a fucking island. So how would you know how much of a chemical it takes to treat the water treatment plant for an entire island? You can't measure that. You didn't even know that it was for that. And he said, well, I thought it was for that. And then someone else did a deep dive and said this is the first time that he'd bought it. And Jamie's saying, no, there's a couple of others. I think Jamie might be wrong. I think Jamie might be getting confused because it does come up multiple times in the files, but I think that might well be a duplication. Essentially, the same email comes up, or there's an email exchange that appears twice, and then there's an invoice that gets duplicated. But whether it happens once or multiple times, no one did a deep dive to say, well, it's suspicious because it was the first time, because in 30 seconds, you can pull up the email where somebody literally says, I've analyzed your equipment here, and what you need is this new part with a sulfur injection in order to balance the pH. So that's why he starts getting it out of nowhere, because he needed it, didn't need it previously, it was causing issues. This is very easy to check. It's not one of the craziest details at all. But the fact that this came up when they talked about it with Roger Avery, That has left a lasting imprint, a fingerprint on Joe's interpretation of these files. He's saying this is literally demonic. Now, maybe even when he's using literally, he doesn't mean literally. He might be using it kind of emphatically, but he's still talking about evil and sacrifice and demonism. And this, I think it's important because it illustrates how narratives get cemented on Joe's show. You know, he takes all the ritual stuff from Roger Avery. That stuff's all now just true. It's just true. Even though when we saw it at the time, watching Roger talk about it, it was pretty clearly nonsense. It was pretty clearly the ravings of somebody who is not well connected to what's real in the world. Joe has sanitized all of that, taken the bits that he liked, made it seem like if you hadn't heard that interview, it was a perfectly reasonable conversation. He's taken what he's read about the sulfuric acid and what they talked about, and now their interpretation of it, that's just become the truth now as well. And this is how Joe Rogan manufactures narratives without even realizing he's doing it, and then convinces himself of those narratives. The initial conversation where that whole idea got workshopped, that would have been obviously false to anybody who was listening, that had listened to Roger Avery and gone, well, that sounds like nonsense. But this version, when he's talking to Evan, this is definitive and it sounds way more reasonable. Like, God, that's an extreme thing that they talked about, but it doesn't seem like it's extreme because it's nonsense. It seems way more plausible based on nothing at all. And I would imagine the next few times that Joe talks about this, it's going to be this version as if it was just true, divorced from the circumstances of him deriving it and workshopping it with Roger in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, you know that Roger Avery isn't connected to reality because he says, like, reality we know is fake. So we know he's not connected to reality in any meaningful way if that's the thing he's saying. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great through line, and I think this is good analysis by you to point out that he is picking and choosing the things he wants to pass down to his next guest. So we do cut a bit of tape here, and this is them talking about sort of like who was in the certain emails and what they were talking about and who sent them and stuff. But then they talk about who sent them and why should their name be redacted. And that's where we pick the conversation back up.
What the fuck, man? And why is his name redacted? Why would your name be redacted if you're not a victim? Like, this is what's crazy about all this. Like, how come you redact some people and you don't redact other people? Like, what is this? This is not good. None of this is good for this administration. It looks fucking terrible. It looks terrible. It looks terrible for Trump when he was saying that none of this was real. This is all a hoax. This is not a hoax. Like, did you not know? Maybe he didn't know, if you want to be charitable. But this is definitely not a hoax. And if you got redacted people's names and these people aren't victims, you're not protecting the victim. So what are you doing?
Right.
And how come all this shit is not released? Like,
you would think that all of it would just, like, get rid of all of it. Just expel it all.
It's crazy. So this is the conspiracy that drives me the most crazy.
So again, people have spread this clip, and it's made the news in lots of ways, like it's Joe blaming Trump or criticizing him. You know, he said it's a hoax. This isn't a hoax. I don't think that's what this clip is. I think it's Joe saying, this looks bad on Trump, but he wasn't responsible for it at all. It looks bad, but he didn't know. Yeah. This is one of the few times that Joe ever brings Trump's name into this conversation at all. And it isn't at any point to say Trump is in the files and was pretty good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. It's not about that at all. So this is not Joe criticizing Trump in the slightest, despite the fact that people have portrayed it that way.
Yeah. I agree. It sounds like he's trying to make an excuse for him. Maybe he didn't know. Let's be charitable. He didn't know. Okay. If he didn't know, why would he spend all that time trying to redact his name, right? You had the guy who was going to do a lot of these redactions in front of you, and you never asked him a single question of substance. That's Kash Patel. You didn't ask him a single. You brought it up, and then he said there's nothing there, and you said, well, I guess I'll let my listeners take care of this. I won't even ask him a follow-up question when he said there was nothing there. You know, maybe here's what they're doing, right? They're redacting some names. They're publishing other names, specifically publishing names of victims. Now, you could ask, why are they doing something like that? Why would you do something like that? Why would you mess up so badly and produce an entire list of victims and redact the name of a co-conspirator? conspirator. Why would you do that? Now, it could be straight up incompetence. That's a possibility. But it could also be using it as a political weapon, as sort of malicious compliance. Like, oh, you're going to make me post this stuff? Well, I'll post all the victim names then too. If I'm being forced to do this, then I'm going to be forced to somebody else. That's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Being incompetent is a perfectly reasonable explanation. We need to figure out which one it is, because one of them should be a crime. One of them should be something that people have to answer for. If it's not a crime, you should at least have to step down because you did something like that. Those are important things we need to figure out, and we need to make people answer for those things. Is it incompetence? Yeah. Maybe. We'll find out when we do the questioning. We're not even doing any of that. We brought Bondi in front of there, and she just talked about the Dow for the rest of the time she was on there. So we didn't actually get any answers for any of the questions that we had. And on Joe's show, there's no questioning of this administration. There's no questioning the top of the food chain. What he's saying is, wow, this looks bad. That's the answer. That's what he had to say. Not, this is bad. This is a terrible thing that he did. None of that. What did he say? He was talking about appearances. Okay, so now he brings up the file. The following day, he's talking to Robert Malone. This is episode 2454, February 13th. Robert Malone's a virologist. He was supposedly the original inventor of mRNA delivery systems with the vaccination. There's a lot of back and forth about whether or not he is or he isn't involved in those things. He stopped working on this stuff a very long time ago. So we're not going to get into the validity of his virology background. He's talking about the files, and that's why he's on this show. Here's the first clip, about an hour, about 50 minutes in.
If you want an example of that, look at the threads that are coming out on X, illuminating the networks of affiliation associated with this latest Epstein file release. Just mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
And it is just like, we can sit here and bitch and whine saying, oh, they didn't release that, or blah, blah, blah. This is redacted. All that's true. But still, the impact of that information, and we're still getting to the bottom of it.
It's completely changed most people's narrative of what happened. Like, we had this sort of vague understanding, but when you see in the email, like, clear evidence that they're talking about children.
In pretty obscene ways.
Horrifying ways. So that was the thing that, like, even when I talked to Mike Benz about that, he was sort of incredulous about that. It's like, I don't think they would use children. It just doesn't make any sense if it got caught. But it just seems like,
if Mike Benz was incredulous, I know. That's pretty big.
I just don't think we really knew until we saw those files come out.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, well, there's no denying it now. My position on it is completely shifted. I thought there's probably some really sick people that have an appetite for that, but I hadn't seen any real evidence for it until these files. And now I'm like, oh, this is demonic. This is clearly demonic.
Again, we're a few days in. All of the narratives and the interpretations, these are cemented now. Joe was once kind of unsure when he was talking to Mike Benz. He wasn't, when he's saying, like, I didn't believe the stuff about children, he's not saying that Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. That's not the stuff he's saying he didn't believe. What he's saying is the stuff about eating babies, things like that. That's the stuff he didn't believe. But now, because he's been talking about this for a while, because he's been digging through it with people like Roger Avery, that narrative cemented, and he's confident that this is demonic. It's clearly demonic. This is sick people with an appetite. He's not talking about the actual crimes that were committed. Those have faded into the background because the sex trafficking of women and girls just can't compete with child sacrifice and demon worship and the dissolving of bodies in sulfuric acid, which is now the focus for Joe. And it's not on the actual victims themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Benz might not have believed about the children because he did push that narrative that a lot of them were older. So maybe he didn't believe about the children.
Maybe.
All right. Now they're still going to do some more religious discussion here. We're not skipping any tape. This is more just religious discussion about what was happening in these files.
So whether or not demons exist, if they did exist, that is how they would behave. They would prey on children and torture children. And there was the one where there was a suggestion when a child was praying to Jesus that, like, there was a joke that someone should dress up like Jesus.
Did
you see that one, Jamie?
No, I'm not watching this stuff.
I don't even want to. I don't even want. People send it to me, and I go, okay, because I'm for the most part off social media. but every now and then someone will send me something that I have to look at. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And these are emails back and forth. There's one of them where Epstein says, I enjoyed the torture video. There's these references to pizza, a lot of references to pizza that are 100% some kind of a code.
Yeah.
And then it brings you back to Pizzagate.
Yeah.
And which was widely dismissed. You know, everybody's like, oh, this is a bunch of kooks.
So, yeah, now he's at all the references to pizza 100% a code. He's kind of worked his way all the way back around to believing in Pizzagate off the strength of these emails and these releases. But these releases don't support the idea that pizza was 100% a code, not at all. And what we've shown is he doesn't actually care. He might think he cares. He might wish he cares. He might tell you he cares. But in his actions and the things he focused on, he's showing us he doesn't actually care about the sex trafficking of girls unless it involves Satanism and cannibalism and melting bodies in acid. That is what he's showing us through all of this analysis, through all of these conversations he's having.
He says here, so whether or not demons exist, if they did exist, this is how they would behave. What are you talking? If dragons existed, I would be friends with them and I would take them for walks. And I have armor in my house and swords. So think of the cosplay opportunities I could have if I had a real dragon. This is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. But you know what, though? This is him now legitimizing this. He's working to legitimize this because he had a guy on who was clearly unhinged, literally said reality isn't real. And then he's talking to a guy, and it's easier to slip this in with a religious guy because they also believe in demons, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Yeah, if dragons existed, Joe would have them on his show. He'd be talking about how hard it is to have all that wealth. Isn't it difficult that they want to take some of the government wants to take some of the gold off you? Adventurers are coming to take some of your gold. We need to invest. We need to allow dragons to set up as many lairs as they want.
Yeah, the X there is the X that marks the spot for the treasure, though. That's not the X that he normally talks about. Okay, this is the last clip in our main event. This is, again, skipping no tape. They're talking about God's presence in this one.
She said she felt God's presence next to her when she was in bed. She knows that Jesus watches over her and he helped save her life. And then he writes, whoops. And then in response, Jeffrey Epstein says, you should dress up as him when you see her.
It is dark.
You should dress up like Jesus when you see her. What the fuck?
And well, look at the
You're
line.
talking about a little kid.
Look at the line. Look at the line above it. How am I supposed to interpret "I'm coming" trick?
The OH Jesus, I'm coming trick.
So, firstly, Joe says here you're talking about a little kid. You have no idea that this is about a little kid. You don't know that. Maybe it was about someone who was a kid, as in 10. Maybe you're talking about someone who's 15 or someone who's 18 and and a victim of sex trafficking. Now, I would care if it turns out to be any of those, including the latter two. But what Joe has shown is he doesn't care if it's 15 or 18 because he's ignored all of that and focused on pizza and grape and jerky and a little kid who's praying to Jesus and you're dressing up as Jesus in order to abuse them. And what this sounds like to me, and again, we don't know the full context of this. It sounds like they're joking about, someone telling about their faith, maybe someone, two people talking about someone they're sleeping with who's maybe religious, told about this faith. And that last line is not, oh, H Jesus, I'm coming trick. They're saying, oh, Jesus, I'm coming. They're like, oh, dress up as Jesus. It's the, oh, Jesus, I'm coming. It sounds like they're speculating it sounds like they're exchanging jokes about someone's religiosity or something. It sounds like someone who's just callous about the way they talk about the people they're sleeping with who are victims of sex trafficking here. That's what it sounds like to me. But what Joe and Robert Malone here have done is they speculated to the point where they've invented the age and the demonic nature of the age of the victim, the demonic nature of the crime. They haven't even bothered actually reading the fucking email itself, which is just 3 lines long, which tells you more about what this is. They're coming to the OH Jesus I'm coming trick. They're saying she's religious. When you sleep with her, dress as Jesus. Oh, Jesus, I'm coming. They're just making callous jokes about someone's faith of one of the people they're sleeping with. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like shitty attitudes towards the people around them. And that's what we're looking at here, I think. And that person may be overage, they may be underage, they may be a sex trafficking victim, they may not be, but that's what we're looking at, I think.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our undercard.
And the undercard's banging. The undercard's filled with fights.
Okay, so for our undercard this time, we're going to actually look at some of the older mentions, some of the older shows. So let's see how Joe covered the Epstein files in the past. We've got a couple of clips we've already looked at, but we're going to look at a couple more. We covered this show before, but it's an important piece to bring out. This is Bari Weiss, episode 1415, and this is from January 2020. This is January 20th. Wow, right before the pandemic.
Well, this is an interesting one, I think, because at the time we mentioned, when we covered it on the show, that Bari Weiss, they have a conversation about Epstein. We didn't go into too much detail on it, but it's since come out, it's been revealed that Bari Weiss's wife is in the Epstein files.
Yeah.
Nellie Bowles is in the Epstein files because she was communicating back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein. They were arranging a meeting at one kind of time. So it seems like Bari Weiss is a step removed from people who knew and circulated with Jeffrey Epstein. So that kind of puts this in a new light, I think.
Yeah, and if you don't know, Bari Weiss is the editor-in-chief of CBS News now. At the time when she was talking to him, she had run her own website, a news website, and she was a writer for the New York Times, but now she's the editor-in-chief of CBS News. So here we go. Here's the first clip.
I don't know what...
The question was, did he work for the Mossad?
Did he work for the Mossad? Did he work for the American government?
Right.
Like, who did, you know...
Can we just agree that he was murdered?
If
you had all your chips on the table, like Barry, you got to go all in. What are you going to do?
There are too many coincidences to make it plausible that Jeffrey Epstein, like the video, we could go down the line. I'm sure you guys are like Jeffrey Epstein truthers in here.
Deep.
You guys are fucking deep. I'm not even going to try.
We're all in.
It's something that I've followed not as closely as you have. But the little bit that I've followed it makes me incredibly suspicious of the official story.
Remind me after the show. I could tell you off the air some crazy shit.
Why don't you tell me now?
Can't.
Why?
Because I'll tell you after the show and you'll understand.
Okay, I'm excited.
I wish I knew what they talked about after the show. I mean, I would imagine that she could tell you some crazy shit, like that her wife was in communication with Jeffrey Epstein and appears to have met him. And like, I'll be honest, if I found out that someone my partner had a conversation relationship with turned out to be the world's most well-connected pedophile, I'd actually follow that case pretty closely and I wouldn't pretend otherwise.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like, I haven't really spent too much time kind of following it and stuff. I'd follow it really, really closely. And it is fascinating that she's saying she hasn't been following this. That is a fascinating thing for her to say.
Well, it's not just Jeffrey Epstein. We've been talking a lot about Jeffrey Epstein this entire episode, but there was a co-conspirator with him who got jail time. Her name's Ghislaine Maxwell, and so let's talk about Ghislaine in this next clip.
And Ghislaine?
How do you say that? Ghislaine? Nobody knows how to say it.
I don't know how to say anything, but I think it's Ghislaine.
Mm-hmm.
Like her whole thing, like that whole photo op at the In and Out, reading that CIA. I mean...
Yeah, CIA deaths.
It's so good.
It's crazy.
So good.
It's crazy. And where is she?
I don't know.
She's at a base in Antarctica right now. Fishing for penguins. Like the whole thing is crazy.
It really is.
I don't even think there are penguins in Antarctica, right? They're in the other pole. Either way, the whole thing it's going to go away. And we all kind of know it's going to go away.
Okay, now, this might just be me, but listening to this now, with the knowledge we have that Bari Weiss's wife was conversational with Epstein, does it feel a little bit like she's trying a bit too hard to illustrate how little she knew about Epstein and the people around him? Like, is it Ghislaine? I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't even know how to pronounce the name of his co-conspirator, despite the fact that my wife was in his orbit. Yeah. It seems, who knows, maybe it's genuine, but it seems interesting in retrospect.
She definitely lands on the correct pronunciation eventually. That's for sure.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, she doesn't land on Ghislaine. That's for sure. She lands on the actual pronunciation. Almost like she was told that a couple times. I don't know. Also, by the way, I think this is great. Joe has two polls to pick from. He covers his bases with the Penguins. I like that he covers his bases. He's like, it's either this poll or the other poll.
It's one of the two.
Important. Okay. All right. So more recently, we covered that 2021, but more recently, he brought up Epstein on September 17th, 2025. This was with Jordan Jensen, episode 2380. Now, a week earlier from this episode releasing, and we don't know exactly when this show was recorded, so it might have been recorded very closely to when this released or not, but a week earlier, on September 10th, Epstein's 50th birthday book was released. This was released all over the news, and it had a full, alleged, real version of a message Trump sent to Epstein. Now, we had learned about that message in July. They had posted an image of it, and the image that they did was an artist rendering of the image, right? So they did an artist rendering because they didn't know that they could publish the actual thing. This was when the Wall Street Journal actually published the actual image. And this was a big news story. If you're not sure what this image is, this was a message in the 50th birthday book to Epstein from Donald Trump, allegedly. And it was an image with a text narration. They're going to read it on here, so I'm not going to explain it too much. But the outline of it was a crudely drawn silhouette. And the signature is right where the pubic area would be. So that's what the image looks like. So if you're not familiar, Jordan Jensen is a comedian, and she has 2 podcasts. Here's the first clip that starts talking about the release of this particular image to the media.
My mom is my news source, which is nice. I didn't know the Epstein drawing had come out.
Oh yeah. So the drawing is was that the same as the one that had been leaked before? Or is it different?
I'm pretty sure that leaked one was someone took the description, put it in AI.
So this is the actual drawing.
Yeah, and this one they actually got the book and someone leaked it. I'm gonna grab it.
The drawing, I did think when I imagined it that it was going to be like I was imagining really DiCaprio drawing a French girl, and when I saw that one, I was like, God, Trump, at least make her hot. What are you doing?
Okay, well, I mean, that's gross. Thanks for that, but that is a gross response to it.
Yeah, right. I realize she might be making a joke when she says, my mom is my news source, but which would we prefer, Jordan Jensen's mom or Joe's Twitter feed? Which is the one, I think? I'm not sure which one I want more.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Okay, so by the way, they did not run this through AI. They said the one that was leaked was run through AI. They didn't do that. They had someone draw it from the original document because it was a real thing, supposedly a real thing that exists, but they couldn't get it cleared from their lawyers to release it yet. So that's the important thing. They didn't just run it through AI. Important point to point out. So no tapes cut. They're still talking about this image that the Wall Street Journal published.
But what was the transcript he had written out? He had it
this is it.
What does voiceover
It's
mean?
like a script.
It says, there must be more to life than having everything. Donald, yes, there is. So he wrote this?
Supposedly.
The voice, it says voiceover, like he's a movie star, like he's in a script. Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Who fucking talks like this? Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do. Come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Ugh.
Yeah.
A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. May every day be another wonderful secret. Ooh. And then I like how he's got the signature right where the bush is.
Yeah. I don't think that he meant for that, though.
Oh, come on.
They made it sound like he meant for that.
I think he did.
I think he just signed it.
Maybe.
But I was imagining
But it's kind of ironic that it's right where the vagine
But I don't
is.
think Trump likes a hairy bush.
That's what you're into? That's a dude. Okay, that's a dude with womanly hips.
Yeah.
Like, look at the boobs. They're weird.
It's like it could be a back.
Yeah, it could be anything. It could be a snail smile.
I don't get why he's writing a script.
Yeah, it's very odd stuff.
It's quite strange.
But it's also like the way, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? And Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Like, if one of my friends sent me that, I'd be like, I'm getting a new number.
Yeah. Yeah, you need help.
New number.
Why didn't you just write happy birthday?
Yeah, what the fuck is wrong with you, Enigma?
Happy birthday, Jeff. That's all I want. Happy birthday, Jeff. May we hang out soon.
So, yeah, this is Joe's response to this. I mean, first of all, Joe is transvestigating even this note. He's like, oh, that looks like a guy.
He is. But Joe, what misses Joe, and I guess her, is that maybe this could be a young kid who hasn't hit puberty yet. That could be something. I don't know. It's also something that Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty to.
Yeah. What we do know for certain is this is creepy and suspicious as fuck. And Joe recognizes that all the way through. He's gone, this is horrible. When he gets the enigmas never age, he's saying, like, this is creepy. Like, you can tell, he's like, if someone sent this to me, I'd be changing my number. So you can give him credit for recognizing that this is incredibly creepy from Donald Trump. Except this is the only time he'll talk about the letter. I had to check. I couldn't find in any other show mentions of this letter. Maybe it's there, but when I was looking through, I couldn't find another mention of it.
Well, and the letter was in and out of the media attention, too. It lasted like 45 seconds because there's so much flooding of the zone. The little things like this just disappear, even though this is a big deal. This is something that people should pay attention to. Also, Trump decided to sue the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion because this thing was posted. So far, nothing in the case has happened. Wall Street Journal, I think in October, said, hey, we'd like to dismiss the case. And that was the last thing that happened. I will keep an eye on this case because there's going to have to be some sort of depositions and discovery around this thing. So I don't know how far Trump wants to take it. If it was a real thing, he may want to be careful about what he's doing. But I don't think Trump cares. I think he tries to scare people with these big numbers, and then he tries to settle afterwards. All right, so this is the final clip in the undercard. Here we go. This is still Jordan Jensen.
Well, also, like, what year was this that he wrote this?
His 50th birthday was the word. So it wouldn't have been that long ago.
Well, it had to be because he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago in like the 2000s, right?
I think 2011.
That's when they kicked him out?
I think so.
I thought it was before that because I think that's when he got arrested.
They kicked Epstein out. Can I touch this?
Yeah, that is a recreation. That's a 3D printed recreation of these very strange vases that they found in Egypt that are part of an older dynasty that are so exact. And the way they did it is completely unknown. That is just a piece of plastic, but that's an actual 3D recreation of the original vase.
That you think aliens did?
No. I think a very complex ancient civilization that was wiped out by some sort of a cataclysmic disaster that had very sophisticated technology. Because that was it diorite that was carved out of?
So, yeah, the birthday message from 2003, to be absolutely clear. But notice that they instantly, we didn't edit that. We didn't change that at all. That is how that portion of the conversation ends. And they do not return to that conversation. And as far as I can tell, Joe Rogan never does. That's the only time he'll talk about the incredibly creepy message that Donald Trump sent his friend Jeffrey Epstein about enigmas not aging.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up with that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you very much. You're a beautiful person.
All right, Marsh, here we are. End of the show. Was there anything good in any of the dozen people that we covered in this?
No, I don't think so. And, it's really hard to even think about it that way because obviously we went through and found just the bits that are talking about Epstein. And I don't think there's anything good about how anybody talks about Epstein in any of the stuff that we've covered here. And you can say that maybe the people going on his show are just, taking the temperature of the show. Maybe Cheryl Hines is just taking the temperature of the show. Yeah. That said, I mean, she's RFK Jr.'s partner. I'm not quite sure that she's the best person for critically assessing how reasonable something is. But certainly Joe's response to all of this stuff is to play it like it is intrigue, to play it like it is gossip, to play it like it is evidence of Satanism and cannibalism and the eating of babies, and at no point to talk about the victims as anything other than objects by which rich men were victimized with blackmail. So, this is horrible.
I think, if I had something good, it would be that at some point he tried to hold people accountable for actual things that happened. Because if he did that, I would say there's something good in this. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't seem to do that at all. He just makes up other conspiracies. He brings in, like you say, he gets sort of quasi-infected by certain ideas, and then he passes those on to other people as if those were, sort of vetted things that actually happened. He's mixing up conspiracy theories between the Podesta one and this one. And, this is an opportunity. One of the things, too, is that you have to remember is that this isn't new. Pizzagate is not a new thing. Pizzagate happened around the Podesta email leak from WikiLeaks. So this is an important thing to remember. Now what we're going to see is resurfaced Pizzagate stuff that's going to start getting resurfaced that's already been debunked, right? They're going to, all the fake stuff that they've put together, these supposedly fake audio recordings of things, all the videos that they're going to say are actually linked to Pizzagate. All that stuff's going to now be recycled because even though it was debunked in the past, now you have the world's most prolific conspiracy theorists on the world's largest podcast talking about this stuff as if it actually happened. So it's again going to resurface. They don't even have to make up new stuff. They could just repurpose old stuff that they can now inflict on the public. This is a real bad thing to not be careful with, and he's not careful at all.
Well, that is it for the show this week, for this two-part special on Joe's reaction to the Epstein files. Remember that you can access more than half an hour of bonus content every single week from as little as $1 an episode. Just subscribe at patreon.com/NoRogan. Meanwhile, you can hear more from Cecil at Cognitive Dissonance and Citation Needed. And you can hear more from me at Skeptics with a K and the Skeptic podcast. And we'll be back next week for a little more of the No Rogan experience.
If you love the show, please rate and share it. If you want to get in touch with us, become a patron, or check out the show notes, go to NoRogan.com. KNOWROGAN.com.